Here follows an extract from my book Artful Designs, available from Amazon. Chapter 11, Part 1. DCI James and Sergeant Maddox made an early start to their day. The enthusiastically early meeting was due in part to their desire to make some tangible progress on the case, but was probably largely due to the pile of bacon and egg muffins that Beth laid on for breakfast. Long ago, Beth's mother had taught her the simple truth that the way to a man's heart was through his stomach. Drew had revised this maxim to suggest that for Beth, food brought her information. Beth simply acknowledged that in life there are many absolutes. Wealth procures power, whilst food secured secrets. She often said that waiters would make the best intelligence sources, insisting that they must be privy to all sorts of secrets on every level, from small domestic intrigue through to high-flying business and politics. There was nothing underhand in Beth's motives, and the arrangement suited everyone. Benedict could be comfortable and well-fed, while Beth could be kept in the loop. As twins, they'd always worked together, and it was natural to share the workload and thinking now. This morning was no exception, and as Drew pottered about cleaning brushes and packing for a morning at the Whitworth, Beth ironed a pile of shirts while Benedict and Maddox ate a hearty breakfast and exchanged news and information gathered over the weekend. "I met with the fire officer as you asked," began Maddox. "I meant to tell you about it yesterday, but it got pushed aside once Finn was found." "Was it a worthwhile meeting? Can it help us?" asked James. "I'll leave that for you to decide. It was as much as I could do to pare down the scientific jargon to something that I could understand. I made notes of everything he told me, so I could read those out, or I can give you the gist as I understood things first. Which would you prefer?" "Just give me the gist, and we'll refer back to your notes to get into the science afterwards, as and when is necessary." "I think I'll need my notes a bit, but I'll paraphrase." The fire officer said that the most relevant information regarding the fire that set the alarms off is that sparks and hot spots can linger for a long time. "Like a really long time," Maddox began. "That sounds vague." "How long is really long?" asked James. "Apparently, it could easily be overnight." He gave an example of so-called primitive societies that can bank down fires to keep embers smouldering overnight, or even so as to be portable in nests of moss. Apparently, it's all down to something called the fire triangle. 3 things combined cause fire: heat, oxygen and fuel. If a spark is insulated to keep its heat, but oxygen is restricted, it can stay dangerous for hours. The heat source is too weak to ignite flames, which makes it difficult to detect. But it's easily initiated and easily unleashed. It's one of the most significant causes of residential fires, your typical cigarette drop down the sofa. A smouldering fire can spread slowly and silently for hours until it hits the critical combination of the 3 elements, and then it erupts. Thankfully, that didn't happen at the gallery. At least the alarm went off before the place went up in flames. Vague as this is, I do believe that this information is extremely helpful. Go on, what else did he say? "The main difference between smouldering and flaming combustion is that a flame occurs in the gas phase, whereas smouldering occurs on the surface of whatever is fueling it. Also, the temperature and heat of the smouldering fire is much lower. It grows slowly, about 10 times slower than a flaming combustion. Often the first cause of damage is the toxic gas, such as carbon dioxide. It's gases such as these that eventually accumulate and are then finally ignited into a flaming fire. In a nutshell, the fire could have started days ago, although probably only a few hours previously. Is that right?" asked James. "I presume that either a lot of skill or a lot of luck would have been needed for it to smoulder for a long time." "What do they say was the source or the fuel for the fire, and what triggered the alarms?" "The source of the fire was found under the floorboards at the back of the security suite. A light bundle of mattress foam and cotton sheeting had a central cloth that was gradually smouldering through the layers of graduating thickness. The museum has a CO fire detector as well as a standard smoke detector. The CO detector is the most sensitive and would have been more likely to activate the alarm. Alternatively, a CO detector isn't so sensitive to plumes of smoke, but in conjunction, all bases are covered. This tells us that the mastermind was quite calculating and very clever. It's likely that they're the thoughtful type and particularly wanted dear Brian out of the way, said James. It also says that they didn't want flames licking the walls of the Whitworth or damage to any of the stock, said Beth. You're quite right, Beth, said James. It really does seem to point to a connoisseur, regardless of how strenuously Monroe keeps telling me that it won't be. Or it tells us that somebody was either very lucky in not creating unwanted damage or very unlucky in mucking it up and not getting the pyrotechnics they'd hoped for. They might have wanted a show and it didn't pull off. Maybe they wanted more time and confusion but didn't manage it. Maybe they had to get out quick before they'd got everything they wanted, said Maddox. An excellent point, agreed James. However, I'm inclined to view the concoction in the security suite as something that was carefully prepared after being tried and tested. Drew was washing his brushes in the kitchen sink whilst listening to the conversation and sensing the noose tighten around his absent friend's neck. I know it looks bad for Rick, he said. I just can't imagine him giving way to such elaborate schemes. It really could be that they just botched the job, but at least succeeded in getting Brian out of the way just long enough to do the job, or at least part of it. Thank you, Drew, for dampening the flames of our enthusiasm. I really thought we were getting somewhere. But as you and Maddox say, anything is possible at this stage, more's the pity, said James. I suppose that at least one of us should get some real work done. I'm off to the museum. Drew spoke to Beth to arrange their domestic schedule for the afternoon. If you can wait until I get back, we can have a late lunch together before you start teaching. He kissed her and said goodbye. Drew was just grabbing his portfolio and bag when Benedict's mobile rang. After a few seconds of listening, Benedict waved at Drew, gesticulating for him to stop and wait. After issuing a few short commands to the caller and asserting that he would leave immediately, he ended the call. Whatever the call was about, it was obviously bad news. First in everybody's mind was the fate of poor Finn. I'm afraid I've got some bad news, Drew. You'd better come back into the kitchen and put your things down, James said. Although Drew would have been sad to hear that Finn had succumbed to his injuries, he was surprised at Benedict's solicitude as he took his bag and portfolio and guided him to a chair. After a brief pause, Benedict relayed the news of the phone call. That was the Met. Sally rang the station not too long ago. I'm afraid that your friend Rick can now explain his absence. Sally found him dead at the Whitworth this morning. He wasn't found straight away as he was in the archives. I am sorry, Drew. I know that you liked him and become quite friendly. I'm so sorry. For the full book of Artful Designs, available in paperback or as an ebook, follow the link in the cards in the description box or find details on my website at sharonbill.com. Thanks for listening.